Good morning. We're very disappointed in you, Drew, because you're no longer wearing an Apple Watch.
You know, Tim, it's been like 4 months now. I'm almost getting my tan back, and I'm happy. I'm living fine without it. I just exercise for no reason now.
Yes, that's quite sad. This upsets me. What can we do to the Apple Watch to win you back over?
Well, can you fix the home screen on watchOS 10?
No.
Well, can you allow third-party Apple Watch faces?
No, we've talked about that.
Well, could you fundamentally redesign it to spice up the functionality and aesthetic simultaneously with the Series 10?
Well, yes, we'd actually love to do just that. You'll have to wait a little bit longer, but it's coming.
Great! Well, then you're just gonna have to be unbanned by the Federal Trade Commission.
Well, yeah. Wait, is that still going on?
Yeah, you've got like 3 days, and then you're banned again in the US.
Oh, God. Massimo, darn you!
Sorry. Let's begin. So yeah, I've been pretty happy getting by without the Apple Watch. I literally never thought I'd be making these kinds of videos. I used to swear by it, I used to love it, but just this fundamental rethinking of essentialism in my life and trying to find devices that can do two things at once. No longer need an iPad. The MacBook does everything I need. I no longer need a designated camera. The iPhone camera is good enough. And the Apple Watch just for me was feeling more and more like a toy, less so as a tool. I was tracking a lot of health data and sleep data, and then I realized I was doing nothing with most of that. And seeing Dr. Mike talk about how most health data tracking from Apple Watches is for entertainment value, usually not so much for actual medical treatment, it made me realize that, yeah, I'm not really doing anything with this data, and notification management just using my phone is not really all that bad. Helps me be disconnected from the internet world a little bit more when I can just leave my phone behind, opposed to having to also take my watch off. And traveling just got a lot easier when I didn't have an extra charge puck to keep track of alongside my iPhone and Mac charger, which thankfully now are just the same cable, same brick. But it got me thinking about part of the reason, like, hey, well, Drew, the Apple Watch, sure, it may not be the most useful tech product in the world, but why swear it off already when, you know, it could only cost you a couple $100 and it's kind of helpful to have a flashlight attached to your wrist or ping your phone and that kind of thing. And I think this argument of cost kept coming up to me because I realized that unlike other watches, you know, traditional watches, which have existed for hundreds of years, Apple Watches have always had this fundamental weakness of battery. And they've tried their best to combat that with the Ultra, just basically make a bigger watch with a bigger battery on the inside. And Apple has some of the most efficient silicon in the world with their ARM architecture. So I don't think the Apple Watch is just like painfully inefficient in terms of power consumption. Most of it's probably the display, not the processor. But a feature request that I would like to entertain and send out to the tech world, because I'm sure Apple is in the middle of this big fundamental redesign for the Apple Watch Series 10. There's talk about them changing the watch band connectors, the overall look of the watch, and it's the 10th anniversary, so similar to how the iPhone 10 was this big fundamental rethinking of iPhone, Apple's probably trying to fundamentally rethink the Apple Watch. And one big fundamental redesign that I think Apple should consider with the next generation for the next decade of watches is making the battery a bit more accessible, because I keep hearing this part come up as to why some people can't get on board with the Apple Watch and some people can, is that it's another charger they have to keep track of, and it's another device, more importantly, an electronic one with software, and when you drain the battery over the course of a day or a couple days and you gotta recharge it again, that adds to the cycles. There's so many cycles put on the Apple Watch battery that a lot of people buying the Ultra or whatever, even if you buy refurbished and used, you're spending $400-500 on these things, and after 4 or 5 years, that small lithium rechargeable battery degrades. And that same thing happened with my Apple Watch, and the longer you own it, once you get into the 4, 5, 6 year mark with an Apple Watch, then the battery sometimes can struggle to get through an entire day on a single charge unless you start activating low power mode and turning off all of the smartness of it, and then it just kind of turns back into a slightly fancier regular watch. It tells the time and not much else other than that. Otherwise, it dies before the end of the day. That's where I feel like the drop-off starts to happen with functionality on the Apple Watch. If your battery can't cover your entire day's use, then it becomes a lot harder to justify charging it every night and putting it on in the morning. And I think what would help a lot is if Apple took some of the engineering expertise that was put into the AirTag. I'm not saying put the coin cells in the Apple Watch. I understand that won't work, but I think there needs to be a simpler, more scalable way to replace the battery in the Apple Watch. Like everyday people, and Apple's now encouraging this with this whole self iPhone repair program, like everyday people can just open up their iPhone and replace the battery on the inside. It's a little bit complicated because of that glass back, but the Apple Watch is a much more complicated battery replacement process. Apple doesn't really support it, and I've often heard that if you ask for a battery replacement from Apple at the Apple Store, oftentimes it's faster and easier for them to just swap out the entire unit. So they just give you a brand new watch and act like, oh, okay, yeah, we replaced the battery on the inside. But oftentimes that's why it's so expensive to get a battery replacement in the Apple Watch, even though the battery's pretty small. Okay, we've figured out a way to put in great heart rate measuring data, and the ECG is fantastic. We've got amazingly bright 3000 nit displays on our watches. Is the next big feature that we could think of a better camera? Yeah, a camera on your wrist is going to be kind of tacky. Is it even brighter displays? Is it higher resolution? Is it more action buttons? No, there's not a lot, and I think a lot of us have kind of admitted that Apple Watches have peaked. That's why a lot of us didn't really see the need to buy a Series 9 or even a Series 8, because it's all just kind of renditions of the exact same thing. It's slightly better this, slightly better that, and I think a better feature to look forward to in a next generation watch that would kind of help win me back over is if I knew that the battery could be easily swapped and serviced. I'm not talking about being as easily swapped as an AirTag, but still something that everyday people could be able to do. And hey, European Union is likely to force Apple to do this kind of thing at some point anyway, right? The general trend that we're seeing with the EU mandates and technology as a whole is, okay, once you've kind of sold hundreds of millions of them and you figured out every possible feature you can bake into a watch like this, now it's time to start working on repairability. Let's make this thing easier to service, more cost effective, so the device itself can last a lot longer than just however long that battery lasts. It's a big complaint I have with AirPods, but those are going to be much, much harder to service on because of their small size anyway. The Apple Watch, I feel like if we're going to be redesigning this thing and changing the watch band connections and changing the overall look, it would be great if at least there was a model of the Apple Watch where they made the batteries far easier to service. And yes, I personally believe there is still a way for them to make it accessible from the back with everyday tools and still make it fairly water resistant while also packing all of the great health data in there. Apple has an amazing engineering team, and especially when it comes to the Apple Watch engineering team, there's not much more for them to do. They've kind of figured out everything they can on the Apple Watch. Sure, we've been hearing rumors about glucose monitoring for like over 8 years now. They still haven't figured that out, so I'm sure we're going to continue to research if that's possible, but it doesn't seem to be possible yet. And sure, there's a team that's working on how to make cooler, more recyclable watch bands and that kind of thing. That's cool, but Apple, if you want to be carbon neutral in 6 years, yep, 2030, it's only 6 years away. That's kind of nuts now. 2018 was 6 years ago, so another 6 years and we're in the 2030s. Yeah, not making the entire device useless once the battery wears out would be very, very helpful, and being able to easily swap out the battery, I think, would be a tremendous win for the environment, for repairability, and I think you'd probably get a lot of people on board with buying fairly expensive Apple Watches again if they knew that, okay, I'm gonna buy this watch and maybe in 7 or 8 years I can replace the battery in it and just keep on going. And a lot of you are probably saying, well, Apple doesn't like that idea because they'd rather you buy a whole new watch, but I don't think that's the direction Apple Watches are going, just because they can't come up with new features fast enough. The Apple Watch has kind of peaked, the innovation has slowed down, and I don't think the direction should just be in, let's come up with new health sensors, new features, because anything they come up with is like, you know, double tap the fingers. It's not a huge deal. But making the battery more serviceable, I think you could win a lot of people over there. But what do you guys think Apple should do in terms of innovating and rethinking the Apple Watch fundamentally from the ground up? All that good stuff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Street Pure, and I will see you all in the next one.